Hi, everyone. I'm Doug Black at Inside HPC, and we're here today to discuss the upcoming ISC conference in Hamburg, Germany next week. And it's, of course, one of the biggest HPC conferences of the year. And the organizers say they're expecting about more than a 20%, I think, increase in the number of exhibitors at this year's conference. So with me are Cristin Merritt. She is Chief Marketing Officer at Alces Flight, which is an HPC systems consultant, systems integrator. She is also a member of the Executive Women in HPC Conference in the Women in HPC organization. We have Bob Sorensen in the ball cap. He's Senior Vice President of Research at HPC industry analyst firm Hyperion Research. And we have Addison Snell. He is co-founder and CEO of industry analyst firm Intersect 360 Research. So everyone, welcome. And thanks so much for joining me. Cristin, let's start with you. I know you're interested in questions of balancing AI's technical potential with its ethical, social, and economic consequences.
That is true, yes. I'm located in the UK and just literally 30 minutes ago wrapped up a lot of the pre-ISC conferences that happen around mostly the northern cities, because that's where the majority of our academic supercomputers are held. The biggest things that are coming out of the desire for the UK at ISC is really to get in and understand a lot more about what the rest of the global community is up to. Particularly for the UK, it is a lot of the environmental first, then it gets into the ethics side of things. So we are very much looking forward to, especially like Addison, you're running a big one on a fishbowl on the questions around AI. So I suppose that's where I look at you and say, is environments and ethics on your list of things you're going to ask the panelists?
Oh, absolutely. It's on the list of things that I want to ask the panelists about, particularly because I think in the United States, and then that has an effect globally, that a lot of the conversations have been shifting on a lot of these topics that we like looking at ISC, like environmental sustainability, like diversity, like the ethics of AI. And I think a lot of the let's say guardrails around those things are diminishing in the United States, and that has an effect on the global scale. So I do think that's a conversation we want to bring to ISC. I know, Bob, that's something you've been looking at Hyperion as well. We're doing Doug's job for him, passing this around the horn.
Exactly.
Yes. So let me just jump in and amplify that. I was at a HPC and AI and QC on Wall Street conference last November, and we got this wonderful presentation from a number of very well-intentioned folks from a major accounting firm, where they just slide after slide of, here are some of the ongoing AI regulations that the financial security and financial services organizations needs to know about. And it was great. And they listed about 10 or 15 countries. And I went up afterwards and I said, this is cool, but what if you're a multinational company? Because they're all different and there's no unification and there's no themes here. And they said, well, that's to be determined. So it's an interesting problem, because people tend to focus on their local concerns, but no one's local anymore.
No, absolutely. I'm going to say, Bob, to pick up from that was a big discussion, because obviously we're on an island here in the UK. And so collaboration across into Europe is a really big deal for us. And to see what is going on with European sites, I think that's where the sustainability aspect comes in, because of a lot of the work that the Nordics do in renewable energy and geothermals is one of the things that has been brought up as we really want to get on the floor, especially with, I did check the exhibitor list. There are a couple of these renewable energy sites that are exhibiting at ISC. So I have a feeling that that's going to be where people are going to be gathering around going, what do we do here? And then, of course, you get into the whole, right, we're in the UK doing work over in Europe, how does the latency work? How does the security work? And I think that's just all these little pieces and parts that are going to come up. So I'm grateful that IST is going to give us a spot where you kind of do a one-stop shop,
Mhm.
go around and find out what's going on.
I wish I'd been keeping an album of pictures of every time I saw someone say net zero by some year over the last couple of years, because by the end of this year, that's going to be a joke. I think you mentioned being an island. I think Europe is going to be the island where sustainability metrics hold on for longer. But globally, we're seeing a big reduction in who even cares about that. You're not going to see the United States talking about sustainability metrics in the short term, and that's a shame.
Well,
Well,
AI is going to
I live
figure
in
out.
I live right down the street from Ashburn, Virginia, which is basically 80% of the internet goes through the 115 data centers. That's how many were there last time I checked. That was a week ago. Um, they are talking about refiring 3 coal burning power plants in West Virginia to run those increased demands for power at those data centers. And it's very nice to talk about sustainability and renewable energy sources, but when people start talking about lighting up coal-fired power plants again, that's when you really start to say, "Hey, something needs to be done here." This is not a trend that we really want to take advantage of going forward.
What do you think, Doug? Do you want to ask us any
Yeah.
questions? Should we
Yeah.
just keep talking?
Or we can just sit here and talk. Yeah.
I've run out of questions. You've covered it. No, the in so many ways, I think AI is outstripping and accelerating and moving forward in many ways beyond, I don't know, beyond the control of any body, country, or whatever. I mean, in terms of capability, uh, or companies like OpenAI are talking about AGI next year or the year after, but they're really aiming for the next thing after artificial general intelligence. The environmental impacts, the social impacts, say on livelihoods and jobs. I mean, in all these ways, yet, as you guys have said, nobody's in control. And furthermore, the technologists are so much more expert than what we would typically turn to for a regulatory or, authority of some sort.
Well, and what I'd say about that, Doug, is that the AI market now has far outstripped what we think of in terms of HPC in a conference like ISC. We as an HPC community have been very quick to claim AI and say, well, this is a great application of HPC technologies. It's an example of what we can do. The converse is not true. The AI market doesn't think of it in terms of HPC. And when we just released our newest forecast, we completely redid our methodology, where at the top level now, it's the AI market. And HPC-AI is a segment within that. And while AI continues to grow, HPC is going to have some uneven years ahead, again, having a lot to do with the United States administration. Over the forecast period, HPC becomes a declining segment of AI because it's a stable segment where everything else is growing. So the us hard-bitten HPC types have less and less of a say in terms of global AI.
Addison, I was gonna jump on your comment until you said it's going to have a smaller section of a growing pie, because the way I see it, AI doesn't cannibalize HPC, it augments it. And so there's more to be done. I don't see a lot of instances where someone says we're closing down this modeling and sim operation. We're not going to do this kind of computation anymore because AI can handle it. I well, we'll see. I'm not going to get on an aircraft designed by ChatGPT. Let's put it that way. So I think that, again, AI can help HPC, but I think it's going to be much more of a collaborative activity than one that cannibalizes the HPC sector.
Oh
In
yeah,
other
I
words,
mean, well, let's talk, Doug. There's the themes behind the ISC conference itself, and a lot of them are around collaboration. Am I incorrect with that? It's more about that connecting the dots, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. And in fact, we've got a special panel, Cristin, that you're going to be part of that I'm moderating. We should mention, this is the 40th iteration of the ISC conference, and they're celebrating 40 years of ISC. We're going to have a series of 3 mini panels around that. One of the segments is on community and collaboration and everything that the ISC conference has meant, means now, and continues to mean in the future. It's remembering the past and looking ahead to the future on 40 years of ISC. The other 2 segments are on scientific innovation and advancement and building the next generation. And those are 3 areas where I think the ISC conference and surrounding community have just meant a ton to me, and I know to a lot of other people. I'm really looking forward to it.
Now, Cristin, it's pretty well universally embraced that HPC-AI advanced computing sector needs to broaden its net for recruiting talent and participation, and also how it faces the world, its outreach to markets. And I think a lot of that is what Women in HPC is all about. Tell us about some of the activities WHPC will be taking part in next week.
Well, Women in HPC is incredibly lucky to have an actual partnership with ISC. So that started about 2 years ago. Prior to that, there'd been kind of a loose agreement in terms of like what events and things were held. But the best thing that ever happened to Women in HPC is that we failed to have our workshop accepted. And I know that that's a crazy thing to say, but sometimes failures turn into opportunities, and it actually put us in touch with the organizers behind ISC, and they began talking about their social sustainability plan, which is something that we incorporated into a project we did last year called Move the Needle. So that was Alces Flight, Women in HPC, and we worked on the people side of supercomputing. And Addison contributed to that. I'm fairly sure if the project had gone on, everybody would have contributed in some way, shape, or form, because it was such a wonderful movement. And over the partnership of ISC and Women in HPC, we have a poster session. This year we have twice as many posters. So we started with 8. We're slightly less than twice. We're up to 14. We also have Tech Talks, which during the exhibitor gala, I get to host those, and we get to bring up early career speakers, and we sprinkle some really wonderful experienced leaders throughout to kind of give them that wonderful boost behind our leadership. There's a real rise. ISC has been a driver of this, but I've seen a real rise in supporting early career researchers, early career, in commercial. And that's not just ISC, and that's not just Women in HPC alone. And I think that in order to broaden the net, we have to, that level of outreach is something that ISC has really pioneered, and a lot of other groups are latching onto it. I'm grateful that Women in HPC can be part of that.
That's awesome. Now, Bob, I know you, a big part of your work is looking at quantum computing. Where do you see trends in quantum and the HPC ecosystem?
I mean, to me, this is all the sector is moving from being kind of an emphasis on a scientific experiment or development activity into a sense of it's time to start thinking about productization moving forward. And so the quantum computing sector has realized we have to start engaging the end users of this. And the end users are most likely going to be early adopters within the HPC sector. They're the ones who most aggressively grasp the quickest technology that promises performance gains. They're the ones that are frustrated with some of the performance slowdowns, increasing cost in the classical computing world. And so there's real interest right now in integration of quantum and HPC. When we survey HPC sites and we say, what is the greatest hurdle towards using quantum computers, say in the next 3 to 4 years? The answer doesn't come back to, well, we don't know if we have to choose the right modality. We don't know if algorithms are going to be available. We're concerned how we're going to integrate quantum computing into our overall classical computing infrastructure. We don't have the in-house capabilities. And the quantum computing sector doesn't really yet know how to talk to sector-specific HPC users. And I always say you can't take your sales go-to-market plan, talk to an oil and gas company on Monday, talk to an aerospace company on Tuesday, and talk to a fin service company on Wednesday, and have all of them be comfortable with that conversation. So there needs to be a lot more basic sector-specific understanding between the quantum computing suppliers and the early adopter HPC end users who are really eager to embrace the technology, but are just concerned what it's going to take to tap into that performance capability. How are they going to identify the applications that are best suited for quantum? How are they going to integrate that into their existing classical ecosystem? So it's really more now about driving quantum into the overall advanced computing ecosystem, as opposed to just looking at development of the quantum computing system as a standalone object of interest.
Addison, how about you? You all are looking at quantum at Intersect 360. Is it still too far out there for or do you agree with Bob?
Oh, I think Bob made a lot of excellent points there, and I would never dare to disagree with Bob on anything that has to do with quantum computing. I'll add that going to ISC, this is an area where I kind of prefer the ecosystem that I see around quantum in Europe and Euro HPC compared to what we see in the US is a lot more siloed, and it's in different this company versus that company and which tech is going to win. Whereas the European approach is a lot more community and collaborative oriented. And that's what we've talked about before with things like ISC and Euro HPC. I think that community approach is really strong. We're going to be researching this as part of our State of the HPC AI market series. One of the modules is on quantum computing. We'll be surveying our HPC AI leadership organization, Halo, and incorporating solution briefs from a lot of the different players. But what I see so far is I like the European approach, and I hope that we can see more of that community and collaboration, like Bob was alluding to, help quantum get integrated into these solutions, because I think that's what it really takes, rather than competitively, oh, my solution is best for everything, and oh no, mine is. That gets really tough, which is exactly to Bob's point.
To just jump in on the poster side and a lot of the early career stuff that we're seeing for women in HPC, like last year, our one of our travel fellows, her background was quantum finance, and a lot of the work there is so much driven on that general excitement and education around that. So I am actually perceiving that you'll probably get a lot of the quantum side of things and the excitement around the quantum within looking at the project posters, the research posters, and early career, because that's your generation that's going to come in and really shape that particular thing. And from that kind of collaborative standpoint, I will say yes with Addison. There is a lot more collaboration going on with Europe rather than commercializing the types of models. I mean, that's just seems to be the kind of culture they've established, which is got a lot of potential to create something really special.
I think Cristin brings up a good point, and we talk about women in HPC, and every time we have a gathering, everyone talks about the shortage of skill set in HPC. Where are we going to hire the new workforce and everything? I always say it's a simple answer: embrace half of the other half of the workforce that's out there. What I find interesting, and Cristin, you may put your finger on it, is yet when I go to a quantum conference, and it's deep tech, it's research, it's PhD presentations. I look around and go, oh my God, there's women here. This is so unusual that it's noticeable. And there is something that the quantum sector has managed to capture in terms of attracting the best minds, as opposed to when I go to an HPC conference and I run into kind of the same old faces. And I think that whatever quantum has done, whether it's the excitement, it's the fact that it's a new technology, so there's no legacy, there's no rules in quantum like there is in HPC. If there's something that to be gained by what quantum technology has done right that could be transferred to the HPC world, that would serve a whole bunch of value added to the HPC sector writ large.
Absolutely. I think I was lucky again this on the road show today. I talked a lot with a lot of the attendees up here in Durham about the fact that one of the upsides and downsides of supercomputing is that we are so far ahead we don't have models, so we look around to what already exists. And I think that is something that is a bit of a trap, and it's not a technical trap, it's a very human trap. We look for things that we can relate to, and either we will try to recreate it or we will try to do something entirely different from it. And perhaps what quantum does for us is that it kind of shows you that you don't need a model, that you can actually just bring in ideas into one location, and that maybe is much more open and attractive than to, well, I don't know terminal, I don't know Fortran, I don't know some foundational element of supercomputing. I can just come in and learn and be excited about this, and end result is I hope I get to contribute.
Yeah.
Let me ask you all, getting back to this issue of HPC AI, is AI subsuming HPC, or is AI for science going to be, it's part of HPC, therefore HPC will thrive within its its traditional role in scientific computing, or do we broaden the definition of HPC? Or, as an HPC tribalist myself, I would like to think that AI is an HPC workload, but maybe that's a really antiquated way to look at things. I guess the question is HPC going to become such a small part of what is the overall AI market, as Addison has been emphasizing, that it kind of disappears, or what is the path here?
Well, I think you did the right thing, Doug, by pointing out there's a question of what we do for AI for science, right? And HPC has always been at the wag end of a larger enterprise computing market, and we build HPC systems out of components that are designed for something else. In the case of AI now, what's changed is what's the driving force. It's not general enterprise computing. A lot of the technology vendors are going to be focusing on building out very large scale AI infrastructures. But then HPC is left with a familiar problem of the idea that the technologies or systems that you build for AI for hyperscale, for your TikTok and other social media, or your online retail and advertising or customer service agents, is kind of a different problem than AI for science. And that's where we see the Department of Energy or other national labs around the world really focusing on, okay, well, now our role is how do we adapt AI for science, or adapt these technologies to HPC going forward. It's a different problem, but HPC has been here before. In the transition to cluster computing, decades ago, there were plenty of people who were saying, well, that's not real HPC. It's good for flops, but not really efficient. It's not going to serve all applications. Guess what? The market was evolving that way, and the HPC and science community had to figure out how to evolve and go with that with MPI and other tools. Now it might be a different conversation, not around clustering, but around, say, precision of calculations. And where do you need 64-bit? And will emulation, like Ozaki scheme, really come to the forefront? Unfortunately for HPC, this comes at a time where, in the United States, we see current policy is maybe favoring engineering and AI, but not favoring basic science. And we're going to have cutbacks in a lot of areas that fund academic or national scientific research. So it's kind of a dual challenge currently, just sort of really present, and that affects the overall market dynamics.
Cristin, I'm interested in your perspective, because Alces Flight is on the front lines of working with your clients on, the compute strategies that they need. Are you still seeing healthy demand in traditional HPC, or are you seeing a shift?
I think that's a good question to ask. And the thing about how Alces operates, we're very much about like solving the problem that the customer needs, and to view what people have as the means to an end, as tools, as a means to an end. Addison said, we've taken things that were for one thing and we're using them for something else. I think that's a wonderful way to really address the fact that we have all these opportunities placed before us, and that we're taking the time, effort, and energy. And like ISC as a conference is an opportunity to say, right, how are you constructing these things? How can we talk about optimization, not only just of hardware, but of software itself? There's a lot of stuff going on now about, especially within the vendors who I was able to speak to today, about how they were actually speaking about the joy of creativity, and that how, to not put the bad lens on AI, that instead it's opening up opportunities to explore what they make and what they do, and giving new options to the customers. And Alces Flight is right alongside. We love this great opportunity to work with people to solve these problems in new ways. For me, because my journey into high performance computing started with the whole cloud viability, it is just, I look at it as this is not necessarily a bad thing, because everyone was afraid of cloud. They don't know how to measure cloud. And then people started to really appreciate the tools that cloud gave them, the containerization, the ability to get a hold of a lot of resources very quickly when they needed it. And I think we're going to see that again. We're going to see it at the show. People are going to start talking about it. It's like, how do we leverage this? And whether I'm talking from a community side, like how do we leverage talent, or whether I'm talking from a company side and saying, how do we leverage it, our services and our subscriptions? What matters is that people are creatively solving problems and hopefully collaboratively and together.
Bob, let's finish up with you. I know you mentioned the post exascale era, exascale having been officially confirmed, I believe at the ISC show in 2022. Now I think we're starting to see, I don't know if you'll agree with me, an emerging post exascale infrastructure, at least within the Department of Energy in the US. But what are your thoughts about this whole post exascale era?
Well, the first thing is, like Addison, I'm just so taken with how the Europeans things handle so much more sophisticated. I'm a huge fan of the Jupiter architecture, the first exascale system going into the Euro HPC network. It's a heterogeneous architecture. They've got a CPU partition, a GPU partition. There's going to be a quantum partition. There's going to be an experimental partition that may be a European processor base. But the idea there is that you have workloads that define architecture, not the other way around, which is how we defined HPCs for so long, where you pick an architecture. And I'm not just going to pick on Argonne for no reason, but that was a huge homogeneous architecture. It's a Procrustean system. Your application better fit into the architecture or it's not going to run effectively. And so what I see is the idea that next generation systems will be much more workload sensitive. The architecture will be defined by the workloads at hand. So if I'm a national lab, say in the desert somewhere, outside of Santa Fe, and I have a pretty fixed workload, or I run 2 or 3 jobs every year for long periods of time, I built an architecture to do that. If I'm NERSC and I have 11,000 different users, what am I going to do with a homogeneous architecture? I need to build a workload-specific architecture that matches the requirements of the variations of my workload. The Jupiter system will ultimately run LINPACK, but they're not even going to run the CPU partition on it. It's not even worth their effort. They're just going to run the GPU side. What I expect to see is much more workload-specific machines that it doesn't even pay to benchmark the entire system. How do you benchmark an architecture that is CPU, GPU, cloud-friendly, has a quantum partition, may have neuromorphic computing as all of its compute components? So how do you benchmark that? How do you say, oh, how does LINPACK map to this particular problem? So I think what we're going to see is a more sophisticated response from an architectural perspective to what the workloads demand going forward. And if they happen to have reasonable performance on lower or mixed precision stuff for AI, that's going to make the newspapers, that's going to make the Hill happy if they shelled out some big money for that. But the bottom line is, is it addressing the requirements of the workload? So in essence, we may have seen the high watermark in terms of theoretical peak performance for systems. It's on an unsustainable trajectory. $600 million systems, $300 million energy bills to run it for 4 or 5 years, a 4-year procurement cycle that no vendor wants to even show up for anymore. It's too complicated, it's too risky. There's so many factors driving a reevaluation of how it's done. Terry Quinn, the Department of Energy, gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago where she said that DOE is actually moving towards not buying integrated systems anymore. They want to be the systems integrator. They want to go out and buy the components and the technologies and the hardware components that they need to meet their workloads, not get a finished system from a single vendor. And they think that the time has come for more and more organizations to say, what do we need? We can go out and build it ourselves. And that doesn't mean you have to go up to the Hill and say, we're going to deliver a 5 exaflop system. So you better give us a big budget for it in 4 years. It's all about workloads now more than anything else.
Addison, what are your thoughts there?
that was a lot. I agree with
I'm
what
sorry.
Bob said.
I do go on.
That's absolutely right. No, and I'll go back around to the start of the comment or on the European ecosystem, not only with Jupiter and the system going into CEA in France with these modular architectures to go after exascale, but the post-exascale AI factories. I think there's a lot to look forward to. This is exactly the conversation that we want to carry forward into ISC next week, looking at the keynote on sustainable innovation from Oak Ridge National Labs, and Mark Papermaster at AMD. I think there's going to be a lot of terrific content at ISC on exactly these topics. I'm really looking forward to it.
I think I have 2 words I want to say, which were brought up quite a bit this week. It was performance versus efficiency. That's where the real debates were. Are you interested in knowing the performance, or are you more into the efficiency of getting the work done? And then you could spread that into ethical and ecological and all sorts of directions from there.
Excellent.
I said Oak Ridge. I should have called out Scott Ashley, particularly on that keynote address. I didn't mean to not name him. So Scott and Mark on the keynote, I'm looking forward to that.
All right. Well, I want to thank all 3 of you, Cristin, Merritt, Bob Sorensen, and Addison Snell, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Cool. Well, thanks,
Thanks,
Doug.
Doug.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Great talking
Thank you
to
so
you all.
much.
Good.